Oh, hi there, guys. So there was a segment on GB News, I think yesterday, where Patrick Christys was complaining that the Red Cross are funding and facilitating the travel of asylum seekers' families to the UK. So he claims that this is the charity sector getting involved in the migrant crisis. So let's have a little look at a snippet of his monologue on GB News.
It's the Red Cross is paying for hundreds of families to come to the UK so that they can be reunited with people who've been granted asylum here. The charity advises and funds the travel costs of up to 1,000 family members a year. So this is the charity sector getting involved in the migrant crisis and aiding in a better way. You don't need to pay a human trafficker because the Red Cross will help you out.
Well, Patrick, my old mate, this sounds very much like, the RNLI shouldn't be a taxi service or keep politics out of football. Well, newsflash for you, Patrick. The Red Cross have been doing this sort of stuff for donkey's years, basically longer than you've been alive. At the very top of their corporate strategy, it says, we focus on 3 humanitarian causes. Number 1, displacement and migration. Number 2, health and care. Number 3, disasters and emergencies. So I know we shouldn't expect too much from the journalists at GB News, but if Patrick had actually bothered to do some here, it might have been helpful. It might have educated the viewers about what's actually going on. So let's try and understand this issue. So Patrick complains here that male asylum seekers typically arrive and then they seek to bring their families across after. So generally speaking, that is correct. So to give an example, if a family has to go and live in a refugee camp in Sudan after being burnt out of their home by the militia, for example, then that family might be able to scrape together, whatever money they had to get the dad in the family some transport to Libya. When he's in Libya, he might have to work for 3 months or longer, basically as a slave, to then fund his travel across the Mediterranean. After that, he's then travelling across Europe by hook or by crook. And no, he doesn't have to stop in the first safe country. I think we've established that now, haven't we? And then finally he arrives in Calais. So maybe again he has to work in Calais for 6 months, helping other migrants onto boats before he can get his journey across the English Channel paid for. So that journey that I've just described from Sudan to the UK, it could take a year, maybe 18 months, maybe longer. And all that time, his family remain in a desperate situation in the refugee camp in Sudan. Perhaps the Red Cross runs the refugee camp. So if the Red Cross does run the refugee camp, let's say, can they put this guy in touch with his family, and then can they facilitate safe passage for them out of that desperate situation? If they can do all that, should they? Well, I think yes. As I mentioned earlier, one of the other key elements of their corporate strategy is to respond to disasters and emergencies. What's happening in Sudan is exactly that. So I think they would be well within their rights to help that family based on their corporate charter. And it seems to me that Patrick seems to be upset that this is a charity getting involved in, a UK-specific political issue. Well, Patrick, war, poverty, migration, and the displacement of millions of people across the globe they are political issues. I find it quite interesting how GB News and Talk TV frame these issues, as if complaining endlessly about them will lead to some political solution to it all. Perhaps maybe they see that the upshot of all of this is going to be a reform government who finally gets on top of it. No, it's not going to happen. How is reform going to get on top of the issues in Africa or in Gaza or Yemen or anywhere else? As Aaron Bastani of Navarra Media likes to say a lot, the right, they sure do hate asylum seekers, but they like to create more of them. And that's exactly what's happening all across the globe right now. Ultimately, the Red Cross wouldn't exist if life was going well in developing countries, or if there weren't these constant forever wars going on. To put it a different way, or to put it from the perspective of the asylum seeker, I don't know if Patrick Christys is married or if he has kids, but what would he do to help his family if they were in trouble? I'm going to take a wild guess, and I'm going to suggest that he'd do absolutely anything and everything to help them and give them the best life possible. And that's the issue. We can demonise and scapegoat these asylum seekers all we want, but these are people with hopes, dreams and wishes for their family. And no government is going to defeat that. Reform might stop some boats, they might leave the EHCR, they might do all manner of different things, but these people, they're just going to find a different way. It doesn't matter. Unless Patrick has got an idea to get on top of the situation in Sudan, all of this commentary and all this complaining is just noise. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.